Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. The expectations that people have when they first come down to Panama can have quite an impact on their transition from one society to another. And I want to talk about a couple of them, or a couple sets of expectations that are represented among the people that I talk to. Both of them are minority groups, but they're sizable enough that they deserve mention. And in other videos, perhaps I'll talk about some of the others. But these two are noticeable because they stick out. They're obvious. And one group that comes down, and they're smaller in number each year, as a result of more of you traveling around and getting experience outside your own nation. And that is the images of Latin America, Panama, and so forth, from decades past, in the 20th century. Now, I've mentioned this in other videos, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it here, but the attitude that we are somehow a very simple nation, predominantly agricultural, that we aren't very sophisticated, and so on and so forth, may have been true at some point in history in the past. Indeed it was. I know I traveled all over the world, and I ran into that sort of circumstance. But today, well, in the last 20 years and more, the Internet's changed all of that. And so has the single most powerful force, I think, in changing a society, which has been felt here in Panama in the last 2 decades, and that is the increase in disposable income. That is, when you finish the month and you've paid off all your bills, you have something left. And initially it leads to some, it's very positive. It leads to excitement, but some small purchases. People tend to be very conservative. They're not sure how to deal with this. It's completely new. And so they run around and try different things, and they really worry about wasting money and so forth because they don't have a lot of that disposable income. And they're not sure whether next year they'll have any. As the years pass by, the country continues to grow as it has here, and incomes continue to rise. People begin to relax and realize, all right, this is not an overnight situation. This is going on, and I can see it in my own life, in my family's life, and all around me. They begin to open up to new ideas. They begin to try new things, and they become a very different people. And they're on the Internet, and they certainly do know what's going on in other countries and so forth. They follow technology as much as the average American or European or whatever. So it's not what it was in the 20th century. The old third world is long gone, and it's at least certainly here it is. And you need to be aware of the fact that it's not just a bunch of simple country folk. We're well over 75% urbanized here already. Agriculture is less than 3% of the global national income, and so on. We are not a predominantly rural or agricultural society, although we do have a lot of rural areas that are open for people to live in. That's because so much of the population, half of it, actually a little more than that by now, will live in the Panama City metropolitan area, where over 70% of the economic activity takes place. And if you also include Colón, which is on the other side, the other end of the canal, on the Atlantic side, where there is a free trade zone and a variety of other activities, you find that over 90% of the economic activity is found in this relatively small area. The rest is scattered all across the country. So I often say this is a wonderful thing because it means we have both a large enough, at least a couple million, in our metropolitan area that we can support all sorts of activities and events and people coming, performers, entertainers, whatever. You can have a really rich life here. But as a result, we also have large areas where it's relatively lightly populated, and smaller cities of 250,000 or less, down to 25, 50,000. And it gives a mixture of different types of environments that are very useful. However, this shift after 2 decades has led to a society that is not simple anymore. No society is simple. I know that from over 50 years of experience of working overseas. They're simple only apparently on the outside because there's no money. But once money becomes available, the differences and the complexities of societies begin to show up. And people do things differently than their neighbors do, not out of anger, or there's not a problem here. It's just all this time they've had an interest, and now finally they can do something about it. When there's enough of them, the service is made available in the market, and they go and they try it, they like it, and they're off and running. So we've had a couple decades of it, and it's very apparent here in the society. So try to keep in mind that if you have an image somehow of just sort of a mañana society, a lazy, laid-back society where nothing much happens, and one day is very much like the other, and some simple folk are happy to get 50 cents or $1 or something. Well, you can find that here and there out in the rural areas, but truthfully, that way of life, that whole image that people would bring down from television and from movies and everything else from 20, 30, 40 years ago, it's pretty much gone, and it's not the way to look at the country. Yet, it doesn't mean that everybody here is exactly the same as they are back at your home. They're not. There are differences. However, if you come down expecting this old image to be reality, you will be disappointed. So that crowd has to learn fairly early on that this is not the way it is. And the only way they really can get that straight is to come down, travel around, and begin to get that feeling. I remember I was out speaking to a group, and they were spending an overnight at a resort hotel on the Pacific Coast. And it was a pretty large place. It was full of people. It was a weekend. It was during our vacation period here. The place was packed. And I was talking to them, and I was trying to get this point across to them that Panamanians themselves have changed a great deal in the last couple of decades. And sometimes they may have more money than you have in some instances, but the key thing is to recognize that they're not that different. And one of the people in the audience of the tour group said, yes, I've noticed that. My wife and I were talking about the fact that the hotel here is full of Panamanians. And I said, that's right. That's absolutely correct. I hadn't even thought about that, but his point was well taken. It was the vacation period. It was they took some time off. They came to this resort as an all-inclusive situation. You get your meals and your drinks and everything else all packed into one package. And they were having a great time. And so we were all surrounded by the evidence of the growth of the Panamanian economy. So when you are in that circumstance, if you open your eyes and your ears and you look around, you realize, okay, it's not what I thought it was from some time in the past. And that can be taken care of relatively simply and quickly if you're open-minded and you just look around and try not to look for examples of what you think it should be like, but look at what it is today, because it's not bad. Most of us find it very good. We appreciate it. The second group are a little bit more problematic, and they have a very different set of circumstances. So we're not talking about the same thing here. They may have some things in common, but they're really quite different. And we see this in recent years, particularly from expatriates from Europe, as well as North America, but also from other Latin American nations. And they have heard so much about how Panama is this economic miracle and it's growing like crazy and the incomes are rising and so forth, all of which is a basis in fact. But they get this attitude that it's a booming place and all they have to do is come and set up a business and they'll make money. Oh, no. We're a small nation, a total of about 4 million people. We have a market that can be saturated with, for example, pizza restaurants and sushi restaurants very quickly, and we are in both cases, certainly in the Panama City area. We have so much has happened, and it's so well known now. The people that come from countries of 50 million or 150 million people or whatever, they expect that huge market. It's not here. It's here. A market is here. But you don't want to do the same thing everybody else is doing. Now, this is not particularly shocking or anything of the sort. What happens, the problem comes, is they make up their minds before they get here what it is they expect to do. They want to set up a business. They want to earn income. They want to sell something or do something, a service or a product or whatever. And they're really, really interested. And they'll write me and they'll say, what do you think about this? And I'll say, well, you have to come down and take a look. Many of the holes that existed here when I first arrived in 2004, a number of services and products were not readily available. Well, they are today, and they've come in because they've met this growing market. Today, there are fewer of those big, obvious holes, but there are small ones, and in various smaller cities they exist where they no longer exist in Panama City. But you can't be sure of anything. So if you have an idea for a business, and you really think, you're passionate about it, you really want to do it, that's fine. But come down, look around, look at other similar operations here, talk to the people, get a sense of who goes there, who's doing what. It's, in a business sense, in the simplest terms, very basic market research. In other words, you don't launch a new business, a product or service until you know something about the market in which you're going to be selling. And you cannot learn that through internet sites. You can't learn that in an MBA classroom. You have to literally get down and be among the people and everything that's going on to understand. And especially a society like Panama, which is going through a growth period, and as a result, you asked me 2 years ago whether we would have XYZ activity, and I'd say, well, we don't right now, but it could be coming. Well, we have it now. I mean, it moves quickly. So even if a year or two ago something didn't exist, it can now. In fact, people ask me, do you have a such and such in Panama City? And I say, I don't know. Maybe we do. It's a big place. There's a lot going on. There's thousands of businesses here. So I can't keep up on all of them. Coming on down then with the idea that you have, a lot of people do, a large number of people do that. It's fine, but don't commit any money to it. Don't commit your life to it, not yet. Come with the enthusiasm and with the idea, but be prepared to look around and realize, whoops, there are already 6 other people doing this. There is competition here. I'm going to try to I get a picture, I'll ask people, I'll get a feel for how much they're getting paid for this, and so on and so on. And it may turn out this is not right. It's not going to work. It might, but it's going to be too difficult. I'm too late to this market. But there'll be something else. The key thing, though, is to come expecting there's a real possibility that the thing you really, really want to do isn't really practical for this market. And if that's the case, you have to have the willingness to stop, recognize that, and then begin to look for something else. Because they're here. There are needs here. There are things that can be done here. People do come down and successfully start businesses, but they don't step off the airplane knowing what that is. And they don't have it up and running in the first 30, 60 days. I had a friend from a European nation, and she's been here for many years, and she was talking to me just a couple, 3 weeks ago, and I said, I've noticed a lot of people from your homeland coming in, and I leave out the homeland because I don't want any nationality to feel hurt, anything like that. A very well-known European nation. And she said, yeah, we have a lot coming. I said, how's it going? And she said, well, a lot of them are leaving. And I said, why? And they thought they could make big money here, and they can't. And I thought, okay, that's very common, particularly among people who have very limited or no experience whatsoever in Latin America, even being near it, hearing much about it. They get excited about this booming economy, and then they come and they discover that there are a dozen Thai restaurants, there's 20 Indian restaurants or Korean restaurants. There are all sorts of, in the restaurant business, beds and breakfasts, we have them. They're common, a number of them. Hotels, hostels, all sorts of activities like that, which many expats come thinking of doing. It's not that it won't work. It's just it's not necessarily going to work in the area you're thinking of doing it in. And you have to settle down, so to speak, and take the time. I often tell people, if they really come down and focus, and they find their place and they stay and open the bags, so to speak, and get rolling, and they go out every day expecting to learn some more by visiting and by talking to people, 30 days later, they're going to have a very, very different impression of everything. They may have 2 or 3 new ideas. They may decide, okay, not here, maybe in another area, and I've heard about this area, so let's check that. Those people have a far greater chance for success because they're flexible. Because we do have needs in some areas, but you've got to find them. They don't come knocking on your door. And it's not that we have nothing here. We have so much here, but we do need other things. You have to come out and find them. I provide consulting advice to people interested in my case, it would be large-scale real estate developments, because my goal is to get some developments down here that have a variety of different price points. That is, it can provide housing at a more reasonable price than has been the case in some overbuilt areas of the country. And it's not an easy job. And I've been at it for several years now, because I've taken on a really major challenge that other people wouldn't even think of. So I was not unprepared for that. I recognized that, even after spending some time here, that I was really doing something unusual. But I'm one that I'm totally convinced and remain convinced will be very successful once it's done. But there I go. I mean, I understand the problems people face when they come down, and yeah, I now know a lot about getting a business started, about what different tastes are, what different things are happening here, there, and wherever. But I cannot tell you what you should do. Now, I've had people ask, can I hire you? And, well, yeah, you can. Well, I really don't encourage it, because it's a very high rate. It's nowhere near as high as consulting rate as it is in the U.S., but it's high. It's way more than anybody who is just coming down, an average person down to Panama with a small business idea. You shouldn't be wasting your money on me, because I'm not going to necessarily be able to provide you with much in the specific area you're interested in, because I'd have to go out just like you and gather that information. And why should you pay me to do it? You can do it. And people will say, yeah, but what about language? And I say, what I do frequently in countries where I have been is I become friends with a taxi driver. I find one that speaks English, and we get along well. And so whenever I need to go somewhere, I'll take him along, and he will do interpretation for me. And I've done that in 15, 20 different languages quite successfully. And if not a taxi driver, then somebody else I've met who's available. And I pay them in their society, a reasonable amount of money, a good piece of money, in return for which they're my voice, so to speak, and my ears. and everything is bent on one thing, and that's gathering information. I suppose that's one of the things I've learned as a consultant on, 60, 70 occasions, when you go into a country and you're given 3 weeks to do 3 months' work. I tell you, they give you a terrific amount of work to do in a short period. You hit the ground running, and you're always asking questions. You don't make assumptions. You ask questions, and you gather information, and you put it together every day and every evening, and you slowly but surely put a picture together. Now, you do that time after time after time, and you do it because someone's paying you to do it, so you better do it well, or you're not going to get another job like that. That kind of pressure, you learn how to go in and do this in a relatively short period of time. But it's not easy, and you don't have to do that. But what you do need, what you should do, unlike that set of circumstances, is to come down and spend some time, quote unquote. And I can't tell you whether that's 1 month or 1 year or whatever. People will give you all sorts of ideas based on their own personal experience. But the truth is, if you're going to make a success of it, you're going to have to put some time into that. It's going to be at least probably a few months, and it depends on the intensity with which you do your job. So if you're just going to sort of look at it from time to time and maybe go out on the weekends and check out this thing or another, all right, you can expect to spend several months, a year, or whatever to get the basics. But if you're out there every day and you're trying to collect that information, it will move more quickly. And then you have a fighting chance of finding a business where there's really a space for you, and it can be something you never even thought of at all when you were coming down. It's being open to those new things. And because you know how to use the internet, and you've probably got a decent education and so forth, and you really have some passion about going into your own business, which is not an easy task anywhere in the world, then I think you can make it work. I know you can make it work. I know people who down here who succeeded. And it's all really basically first getting to know what it is you need and what will work, and then taking your time to do it the right way from the beginning. So expectations, are we a simple country where there are very simple things and you offer anything and people are going to be happy to have it? No. Are we such a society that we have no holes left, that we have everything we need to satisfy all our needs? No. We're in that middle stage. We're rapidly moving from one to the other, and that day will come. But it's no different than somebody from Panama who's thinking of going to the United States, for example, where I'm from originally, my citizenship home, and saying to me, I'm going off to the United States and I'm going to set up a business. I'm going to have $100,000. I'm going to go up to New York City or Boston or whatever, or LA, and set up a business. And I'll say, oh, how long have you spent in the U.S.? Oh, I've never been there. My English isn't very good, so I don't know, maybe I'll find someone who can help me. But I figured that I can make this work, and they're really going to love what I'm bringing from Panama, and it's going to be a great success. And, well, I sit down and I talk with them too, but that rarely happens. People in countries like this understand that. They see us as complex societies that require effort. And Panamanians do go up legally, I thank you very much, and they have been involved in business and financial activities, all sorts of perfectly legitimate stuff, investment firms, for example, who deal with Latin America. And they're very successful at it, but they do their research. So should you. No matter how modest the business may be, no matter how modest the amount of resources you have available for it, you still need to do that basic market research. Understand there's room for you, but you've got to find it. It won't find you. So I just wanted to pass those along, and I hope they're a little helpful to some of you. Thank you for stopping by, and I'll be talking to you again soon.